is a fundamental truth about human nature that most men spend their entire lives ignoring, only to learn it the hardest way possible when their world is turned upside down. That truth is simple. Time exposes what pride works so hard to hide, and it amplifies the heavy reality that silence quietly uncovers. Most men live under the dangerous illusion that their constant effort, their unending presence, and their endless patience are the things that keep a woman invested. They believe that if they just try a little harder, explain themselves a little clearer, or stay around a little longer, their value will eventually be recognized. But life has a brutal way of stripping away those comforting lies to reveal how power dynamics actually function. Brother, as you listen to these words right now, a deep part of you instantly recognizes this reality because you have already lived through the pain of it. You have felt the sting of giving your best to someone who treated your loyalty like an obligation rather than a privilege. But what you are about to discover is the exact moment the dynamic shifts. Because when a grounded man finally decides to step back and walk away, his total and absolute absence becomes the one brutal lesson she was never ever prepared to face. In the initial stages of a breakup or a sudden separation, her mind operates on pure arrogance and temporary emotional high ground. Snorts. She genuinely believes she holds all the cards, convincing herself that you are nothing more than a convenient chapter in her story, a chapter she can easily close, leave behind, and walk away from completely untouched. She builds a cozy narrative in her head where she is the prized protagonist, moving on to bigger and better things while you are left stranded in the dust, waiting by the phone, and nursing a broken heart. Pride tells her that she is entirely in control of the narrative, and ego whispers that your devotion was permanent and guaranteed. But here's the critical flaw in her plan. Time does not negotiate with human ego, and time certainly does not bend to comfort a false reality. The moment your physical, emotional, and digital presence completely vanishes from her environment, the artificial high of her ego begins to wear off, and the silent stability she took for granted starts to violently fracture right beneath her feet. What she fails to understand until it is far too late is that your steady presence was not background noise. It was the unseen anchor stabilizing her entire emotional world. When you were there, your consistency gave her the safety to act cold. Your patience gave her the freedom to play games, and your gentleness gave her the false impression that she was inherently superior. She committed the fatal mistake that weak minds always make. She confused your self-control for a lack of options, your consistency for weakness, and your genuine devotion for total emotional dependence. She assumed that because you cared deeply, you were incapable of walking away. But true strength in a man is not defined by how loud he shouts or how aggressively he fights to keep someone who disrespects him. True strength is demonstrated by the quiet, immovable dignity it takes to pack up your energy, shut the door completely, and leave without making a scene. This is the raw, grounded psychology of what actually happens behind the scenes when a high-value man recognizes his worth, steps back without looking for revenge, and lets the cold weight of his absence do the talking. If you are listening to this right now and those lingering old emotions are still trying to pull you back into a situation that drained your soul, type a 1 in the comments below so we can acknowledge that struggle together. But if you have finally reached the point where you are living from a place of unshakable self-worth instead of operating from your past wounds, type a 2 in the comments to mark your growth. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, lock in your focus, and let's break down the exact psychological chain reaction that dismantles her world the very second you choose to walk away and never look back. Your absence reshapes her world. There is a profound, life-altering psychological shift that happens the exact second a strong man quietly, completely, and permanently stops showing up. Most people think that walking away requires a massive confrontation, a dramatic argument, or a loud speech airing out every grievance you've ever had. But real power doesn't scream, argue, or throw tantrums. True masculine power moves in absolute silence. When you make a clean, steady withdrawal, removing your time, your energy, your attention, and your access without a single bitter word, that is where her comfortable illusion of control begins to violently unravel. In the beginning days, she will put on a massive show for the world. She will act like she is totally unfazed, posting online, going out, and pretending that losing you didn't leave a single scratch on her life. But you have to understand something critical about human psychology. Any lifestyle or emotional high built on arrogance, pride, and false confidence cannot survive the relentless weight of time. The surface show is just a mask, and beneath it, the clock is already ticking against her. When a truly stabilizing presence vanishes from someone's daily life, the human internal world always feels the shockwave long before the conscious mind wants to admit it. At first, it's small things she didn't anticipate. Her morning coffee routine feels slightly off. Her evenings grow noticeably heavier, and the quiet spaces between her daily tasks stretch far longer than her mind can tolerate. The steady, reliable foundation you provided, the constant check-ins, the calm advice, the silent emotional security is suddenly gone. In its place lies a massive, deafening void that she cannot seem to fill. She tries to throw cheap distractions at it, filling her calendar with superficial social events, quick validation from random people, and endless scrolling. But nothing works. The silence you left behind isn't just empty space, it becomes an active, uncomfortable truth that follows her into every room she enters. As the days bleed into weeks and the initial high of her independence wears off, the internal pressure builds to an unbearable level. She starts realizing that the man she arrogantly assumed was disposable was actually the quiet force holding her emotional sanity together. Your total absence forces her to stare into an unforgiving mirror, leaving her haunted by the one question that burns through her pride. How on earth did I fail to see his real value when he was standing right in front of me? Her ego collapses first. Make no mistake about it, brother. When a woman starts to unravel after you walk away, she is not breaking down because she is suddenly starving for romance or missing holding hands. She breaks down first because losing a man who refuses to negotiate his worth utterly shatters her ego. Before you left, she had constructed an elaborate fantasy in her head where she was completely untouchable. She convinced herself that you were so emotionally hooked, so invested, and so dependent on her presence that if she pulled away, you would immediately panic. Her entire sense of power and self-worth was built on the comforting belief that no matter how cold she acted, no matter how much she took you for granted, you would always be there, orbiting around her world like a loyal satellite. She fully expected you to follow the standard script that most weak men use, calling repeatedly, sending long paragraphs explaining yourself, begging for another chance, or desperately trying to convince her to see your value. That expected chase was the rocket fuel feeding her ego. Then you completely flipped the script and executed the one move she never in a million years saw coming. You walked away with total silence, absolute composure, and unshakable dignity. You didn't leave an angry voicemail, you didn't plead your case, and you didn't ask her why. You simply recognized that your standard of respect wasn't being met, and you evaporated from her life. Nothing on this planet dismantles an arrogant narrative faster than a man who calmly refuses to be diminished or manipulated. When she checks her phone and realizes there are no long messages waiting for her, no missed calls, and no desperate attempts to reach out, her pride experiences a catastrophic crash. The reality hits her like a freight train. She didn't walk away from a desperate, weak-willed man whom she could control. She walked away from the one man who had so much self-respect that he couldn't be broken, bought, or bent. This initial stage isn't even traditional heartbreak yet. It is a full-scale, devastating collapse of her identity, forcing her to realize that she was never the one pulling the strings. Regret chases her, not you. True regret almost never arrives with a dramatic, loud explosion or a movie-style breakdown in the middle of the street. It seeps into a person's mind slowly, like a silent leak quietly flooding the foundation of a house until the whole structure begins to shift. At first, she will actively fight against the reality of what she lost by attempting to replace you as fast as humanly possible. She will throw herself into a whirlwind of fast distractions, filling her schedule with new people, noisy social settings, superficial attention, and endless validation from guys who offer nothing of real value. But those quick fixes always run cold fast because cheap dopamine can never replace genuine emotional substance. When the initial excitement of the noise dies down, every single new conversation she has begins to feel painfully shallow compared to the authentic depth, intelligence, and presence you brought into her life. Every surface-level interaction she engages in only serves as a glaring spotlight on the genuine security, loyalty, and peace she foolishly threw into the trash. The regret turns viciously sharp the moment she experiences a terrifying psychological realization. She didn't just lose a good man. She lost the absolute best version of herself, a version that could only exist inside the safety and stability you created for her. Under your protection, she was able to let her guard down, relax her nervous system, and show up as her best self without fear of betrayal or games. Without you around to anchor that environment, she finds herself feeling constantly exposed, anxious, ungrounded, and forced to deal with men who only treat her like an option. While she actively struggles to recreate the magic she ruined, a massive shift happens inside you. The frantic urge you once felt to prove your worth, explain your side of the story, or convince her to see your value completely dissolves into thin air. You stop caring about making her understand because you realize your energy is far too valuable to waste on someone who had to lose you to appreciate you. She reaches a point where she desperately wants to hit a reset button and rewind time to fix her mistakes. But your unyielding, rock-solid boundary keeps the door bolted shut from the inside, leaving her trapped in a loop of her own making. Your walk-away power. The moment you decide to pack up your energy and leave a situation without putting on a dramatic show, hurling insults, or starting an explosive argument, you execute the ultimate power move. A lot of men falsely believe that yelling, making threats, or delivering a fiery speech proves their strength. But in reality, emotional outbursts just signal to a woman that she still controls your mood and holds your attention. When you step back with total emotional composure and absolute quietness, it sends an unmistakable message that echoes louder than any screaming match ever could. She fully expected your emotional attachment to overwhelm your logic, operating on the lazy assumption that your love for her would completely swallow your self-respect and force you to accept crumbs. She thought your feelings would make you soft, forgiving, and easily manipulated. But when you refused to follow that weak script, when you refused to rush back and fill the massive emotional vacuum left behind by her disrespect, a deep and inescapable panic began to set in. Your deliberate, unshakable silence becomes a ruthless teacher that she cannot tune out, ignore, or reason with. When a man leaves with loud anger, a woman can easily construct a convenient lie in her head, telling herself and her friends that he was just toxic, crazy, or unreasonable. But when you walk away with pure class, dignity, and immovable calm, you completely strip away her ability to play the victim. She can no longer hide behind fake excuses about bad timing, unlucky circumstances, or simple misunderstandings. She is forced to look in the mirror and swallow the brutal, unvarnished reality that her own unchecked pride, her own arrogance, and her own poor decisions actively destroyed a high-value connection. Your walkway power rips away every single justification she ever built to protect her vanity, leaving her sitting completely isolated in the quiet reality of her own actions, forced to pay the heavy tax of the consequences she created for herself. Time proves your value. Time is the ultimate judge of human character because it strips away every false illusion, destroys cheap facades, and ruthlessly exposes real underlying value. In the immediate aftermath of a split, a woman who walked away out of pride or mistaken confidence will almost always attempt to numb herself with a temporary high of freedom. She will jump into the modern world convinced that the grass is greener on the other side, surrounding herself with cheap thrills, new faces, constant nightlife, and easy attention from people who barely know her name. But you have to understand a fundamental law of human nature: novelty always decays, excitement eventually wears off, and cheap thrills run out fast. As the artificial high of that fake freedom fades and the loud party noise settles down, the cold, heavy reality of her choice settles right onto her chest with immense psychological weight. When she is left sitting in a quiet room with no distractions to save her, the realization of what she actually threw away hits her like a solid brick wall. It doesn't take long for her to go out into the modern dating pool and receive a brutal, unforgiving wake-up call. She quickly discovers that the modern landscape is flooded with low-tier, inconsistent, ego-driven men who offer zero stability, zero emotional depth, and zero real protection. She meets men who play exhausting mind games, men who lie to get what they want, men who evaporate at the first sign of real responsibility, and men who treat her like a temporary option rather than a priority. This is the exact moment where the internal comparison becomes absolutely brutal for her. Every single time a new guy flakes on her, acts immature, or treats her like disposable trash, your memory flashes in her mind like a blinding light. She starts putting your past actions side by side with the men she is currently dealing with, and the contrast is devastating. She finally realizes that your quiet withdrawal was never a sign of weakness, confusion, or lack of options. It was the pure, unadulterated execution of masculine strength and self-respect. She realizes with absolute terror that you were never an average replaceable guy in her story. You were the high water mark, the rare gold standard of loyalty and strength that she completely failed to appreciate until life forced her to live without it. She realizes too late. As the months roll by, a sharp, icy realization pierces directly through her lingering denial, freezing her right in her tracks. You are never, ever coming back. The confident, untouchable facade she built up to protect her massive ego completely collapses into dust. The lingering hope she secretly harbored, the belief that you were just throwing a silent tantrum, that you were hurting, in a corner, and that you would eventually break down and text her is brutally crushed by the reality of your total absence. Panic sets in, and her mind turns into a chaotic battlefield. She starts obsessively replaying old conversations in her head, analyzing past arguments, and scrolling back through years of old text messages late at night. She goes looking for the version of you who used to move absolute mountains just to see her smile, the man who was always ready to forgive her, listen to her, and work things out no matter how hard it got. But as she searches for that man, a devastating truth hits her right in the gut. That version of you no longer exists. She assumed your silence was just a temporary phase that she could easily control, expecting that whenever she felt lonely enough, she could simply drop a quick text and pull you right back into her web. Instead, she is forced to sit back and watch from a silent, agonizing distance as your life elevates, your energy hardens, and your focus turns entirely toward your own purpose, health, and success. She watches you transform into a higher, sharper, and far more powerful version of yourself, a man who has completely evolved beyond her reach. The effortless, unlimited access to your time, your heart, and your energy that she once took for granted and treated like cheap garbage has been wiped off the table forever. It has been replaced by an immovable, permanent boundary born from pure self-respect, leaving her stranded in the past. While you stride boldly into a powerful future without her, your silence haunts her. During the chaotic hours of the daylight, she can still pull off a believable performance, putting on a brave face, staying busy with work, and pretending to the rest of the world that she is entirely unaffected by your exit. She can put on makeup, laugh with her coworkers, scroll through social media, and hide behind the artificial noise of her daily routine. But daylight always fades, and the night has an unforgiving way of stripping away every single defense a person builds to protect their fragile pride. When the sun goes down, the social events wrap up, and she is left completely alone, lying in the pitch-black silence of her bedroom. The walls start closing in on her. She reaches over to grab her phone, hoping to see a notification, a message, or even a subtle sign that you are breaking down and missing her. But the screen stays completely dry and dark. That cold, quiet screen becomes a brutal symbol of her reality. And in that exact moment, the deafening weight of your total absence becomes entirely unbearable. With no external distractions left to save her from her own thoughts, her brain goes into overdrive, torturing her with a non-stop highlight reel of the past. Her mind repeatedly plays back every single moment she took your kindness for granted. Every time she rolled her eyes at your patience, every conversation where she dismissed your feelings, and every single opportunity she was handed to treat you right and failed to take. She starts to realize that her ultimate enemy in life isn't you, nor is it the boundary you set. Her biggest, most terrifying enemy is the haunting memory of the genuine, rare, and unselfish care that she so recklessly threw into the trash can. She realizes that men who care deeply, love authentically, and stand by a woman with real loyalty are not sitting on every street corner waiting to be picked up. Your complete, unwavering silence acts as an unyielding, unbreakable mirror held right in front of her face. It forces her to sit alone in the dark and confront the uncomfortable, ugly truth about her own choices, all without you ever needing to send a single text, make a single call, or speak a single word to explain yourself. You win by staying gone. You need to etch this absolute truth deep into your mind and never forget it. You didn't lose her. She lost you. For the longest time, she operated on the arrogant assumption that if the relationship ever dissolved, you would be the one falling apart at the seams, crying into your pillow, and letting your life crumble into pieces. But instead of letting the pain destroy you or begging for a seat at a table where you were disrespectfully treated, you took all that heavy raw energy, flipped the script, and poured it directly into your own engine. You chose to rebuild your entire life from the ground up with ruthless discipline, laser-sharp purpose, and unwavering focus. You didn't double down on your fitness, sharpen your mind, or build your platform just to get cheap revenge or try to make her jealous. You rose up because you finally realized that your future, your destiny, and your self-respect demanded a far stronger, far more powerful version of the man looking back at you in the mirror. At the end of the day, absolutely nothing on this earth haunts a human soul more than watching someone they treated like cheap, disposable garbage transform into an exceptionally successful, deeply grounded, highly respected, and completely inaccessible force of nature. Every single milestone you hit, every goal you smash, and every ounce of peace you cultivate sends a massive shockwave straight back to her mind. Your personal growth becomes the ultimate victory. Your steady forward progress becomes your ironclad closure. And your decision to remain completely permanently gone is how you win the ultimate game. You don't win by engaging in childish petty drama, sending angry messages, or checking up on her life. You win by stepping so far into your highest potential that the version of you she used to take for granted doesn't even exist anymore. You win simply because you chose to march boldly toward a brilliant future, leaving her permanently trapped in the cold, quiet regret of the past she created for herself. Off.